signal's getting weak right here. To the left. Oh, you can see him turning his head. I don't know if it's clear on that or not. Oh, you can see the horns right there.
That looks like me. The brow short though?
Yeah, they look a little short.
No, it doesn't long. Looks like him.
It's a nice buck. Congratulations. Move right to him. What are the chances of that?
How much still putting on?
Wow. He's got a lot
He
going on.
had some this brow tiny. I bet you this one must have been like a crab claw here.
Look at this. Oh, right there in the front leg. See the hole?
All right, guys. Welcome to the Deer Shop Podcast, presented by Siman Brothers Outdoors and the Leaky John Boat Company. Your track job was the first fun track job.
Oh, that was the best.
That kind of like, I think part of my life was influenced by that night.
Looking back on it, my biggest regret was opening day. I knew where he would be. I should have just done a simple hanging bank off the corner of that field, and he would have been toast. But I didn't.
That was our first public land deer hunting trip, and it went extremely well. 5 years ago, we couldn't shoot a deer at 100 yards with a slug gun. Now you're shooting turkeys at 100 yards with a shotgun.
It was a 90-yard shot pass through.
And then you miss him 3 times with a rifle at 70 yards on video for the whole world to see.
Yeah, that's what Caleb did.
This is the first buck I've shot in over 10 years. And, not to get too crazy emotional about it, but like
10 years, no buck. Deer Shop Podcast, episode 68. This is the episode about DEERPRESSION, which is a real term that I have coined over the years here at Siman Brothers Outdoors. But if you're listening, there's a lot of new listeners I know from the CJ podcast, the Logan podcast. And maybe you're going to tune into this one and be like, holy shit, these guys are some sad, somber sons of bitches.
We're not talking about giant deer today.
Yeah, and that's not normally the case. But today's podcast is called DEERPRESSION. DEERPRESSION is basically you wait the entire year for that end of October, beginning of November time frame, and when it shows up, things don't go your way, whether it's the weather, whether it's the hunting, whether it's other people, the deer, what happens in the woods.
Or all of those things.
All those things combined, you get to the promised land. Today is November 9th. We're recording. You're listening to this on the 11th. You get to that time period. Yeah, whatever. You get to that time period, and it's just not good. It's the second week in November. We got some sad stories to tell of guys here in the deer shop. We have some sad stories to talk about deer. So the ball has just not bounced our way this year, especially for the guys sitting here at this table right now. There are guys in the crew that have already tagged out, but
there's a reason why me and Ryan are sitting around the table right now.
Yep, and there's a reason I'm here, because I try to make every podcast to kind of do the host job on this. But let's start with what we did this week. You, Isaac, just got back from Pennsylvania. You were doing some public land scouting. You were originally going to go out there and hunt
last week,
and you decided at the last minute, because of some things that happened here in Ohio.
And weather. Weather was terrible at the beginning of last week.
That you're going to can the hunt, and you're going to go out there and scout for a few days. So how did that go?
The scouting went as well as it could have. Did a little scouting, did a little fishing. Fishing sucked. This is the first time I've really scouted for deer in that area.
Public
and,
land, by the way. This is our
Yeah,
public.
so this is mountain area of Pennsylvania, somewhere in the national forest area of the state. And it seems like the deer numbers are super dispersed. And I can't really figure out why. I was finding lots of sign in little pockets, and then I would go miles of walking, checking the same kind of terrain, and there'd be no sign at all, not even a track.
Well, there's two things. One, it's national forest, it's big woods, mountainous, so there's not a lot of crops.
Well, a lot of it's big woods, and then a lot of it is clear-cut timber, thick-ass shit.
So there's not a lot of crops, so obviously that's going to, the lack of food is going to make the deer population a little bit different. But I think another thing that doesn't get talked about a ton, maybe it has started recently, is like Pennsylvania has just kind of changed up their doe tag thing. And I think there's a lot more.
So there was a new quota for doe tags,
I
think this year, and they're like all filled. So where I was buying my license, they had a map of all the different units in Pennsylvania. And all of them were crossed off except for like 2 of them way down in the south end. All those ones crossed out were
sold out of doe tags.
So they were geographically filling tags?
Yeah, so
like
in Pennsylvania they have
many
zones, like 2A, 2B. There's probably like 10 zones in the state. So they sell tags per zones, and that's kind of how their seasons go too.
It's not like Ohio where you can just willy-nilly buy your random tags and shoot either a doe or a buck and rack up 6 deer. Like Pennsylvania has a little bit more of a thumb on
per
things.
zone. Then the seasons are a little weird. They're per zone too. And I think also there's a lot of bears in the area because we've seen a lot of bears when we've been there.
I got a text from Chris, our drone guy, who we're going to talk about a lot in this upcoming episode. His buddy just shot a bear with a recurve bow in Pennsylvania. Well, shit, tonight. So that's cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
Yeah.
So today was the last day of bear season for most of the state, I believe.
Yeah, so we're not going to be able to get a PA bear this year. It's something we've kind of always wanted to do, but we have not put a lot of effort into doing it.
No,
it's something we've always wanted to do.
We've actually never even hunted for them.
Our drone guy, Chris Toth, Skyhound, his buddy killed one tonight, so that's kind of cool. With a recurve bow.
Yeah. But the scouting was good. I kind of found a zone of where I think these deer are hanging out. It's kind of on the ridge tops near the clear cuts. In hardwoods near clear cuts is where I've been seeing the sign. So that's what I'm going to try to hunt next week.
That's good. I had to bring that up because I've told a lot of people, and I think we've mentioned it on the podcast, and it's been mentioned in the Deer Camp Chronicles video series that you were going to be hunting Pennsylvania this week, and you were going to Pennsylvania, so I had to give a little bit of an update.
Yeah, and the weather is looking good, so I'll be there for 2 or 3 days.
Next week, right?
Yeah, I think I'm going to leave Monday.
Have all the cameras been pulled from PA? Do you
yeah,
guys have
that's
any?
one thing I was doing there, too. I pulled Ethan's last camera.
He had one Moultrie cell cam still there?
He had a couple stolen, and this was the last one still there.
Yeah.
It's been there for like 2 years, just soaking.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was near an area I scouted, so like I'm probably going to hunt close to where it was. Not exactly where it was. It was kind of randomly placed in the woods.
He's got some pretty cool. Yeah, Ethan and his.
It was in an all right spot. There just was no sign around that camera.
But he did have. He had a couple different bucks on there this summer, this fall. He definitely had a lot of bears on there during the summertime. So it wasn't a total fail of a camera placement.
And some sunset pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we talked about that last year on the podcast. He set up a cell cam last year, and it like. The way it was, either like
or a bear hit it. We'll give
something happened where it was a cell camera, 250 miles away, pointed straight at the sun for months, which was
until the batteries ran out.
Yeah. Speaking of Ethan, perfect segue. He's in the house right now. Didn't feel like being on the podcast tonight. He's been traveling all day because he went down to Kentucky yesterday morning actually.
Yeah.
This morning, so this is Saturday. This morning, Kentucky's rifle season opened. Ethan went down there last night, bow hunted the evening Friday. Rifle. He was planning on hunting all weekend, but rifle hunted Saturday morning. And he said the farm down there, we've talked about it in this podcast many times, the farm we hunt down there, ghost town. He saw 2 does, no additional buck sign really from when we were down there last. I think the crops were harvested now, so it's kind of barren. We didn't have any cell cameras left down there. He was very disappointed. He bow hunted, saw a couple turkeys, gun hunted this morning, saw a couple does. Rain's coming in tomorrow, so he just made a decision midday to pack it up. And yeah, this is the trophy. This is the trophy that we have from Kentucky this year.
Pretty decent little shed, I guess.
Nice little. You want to find 5-point side sheds, young sheds like that. But
yeah,
Ethan found a shed from last year that Nice buck. Probably one of the, probably like the 5x3 or one of those deer we've been following.
And Ethan's second shed.
It's Ethan's second shed of all time. His first one is
It's up there somewhere.
It's one of these ones on the top shelf somewhere.
One of the big ones.
Who knows? But Ethan's found 2 sheds in his life. This is number 2. One big Ohio shed, one nice little Kentucky shed.
So Kentucky for him, bust. I don't even know if we're gonna get a video out of that. Probably not.
I doubt it.
Maybe some clips.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things where we'll just add it into whatever Ethan ends up doing here in Ohio this year. I'll just add in the segments of him being down in Kentucky.
And for people that film, it's always tough when you go on a trip like this and it doesn't work out. Like, what do you did all this time and effort and you filmed a whole bunch of stuff and then you didn't see any deer. So what kind of video are you supposed to make out of it? We do the best we can when there's a bunch of people and a bunch of stuff that goes on, like our deer
camp life and deer camp, right?
But when you're solo, yikes!
You know, it's like I know we've talked about this. Any longtime listener is going to know that we've talked about this many times. The famous 2020 COVID Kentucky deer camp trip that we took, where we spent a week hunting opening weekend in Kentucky, like the opening week of Velvet, Kentucky in 2020. Rented a cabin, public land. There was 4 or 5 of us, and we saw, I think, 1 deer.
Between
we saw one deer in a week.
We didn't film any deer.
Oh, it was just, we had this huge investment, and we were so excited. We were going to go to Kentucky public land, try to shoot 120-inch Velvet 8-points. So
first
we
time
thought 120-inch Velvet 8-points, we'll be able to find them. Holy shit, were we wrong.
I'll never forget going to Subway and the lady laughed at us when we said,
"What are you guys doing down here?" "Oh, we're from Ohio. We're hunting deer." And they fucking laugh. They're like, "What?"
There ain't no deer
They're
here.
like, "No one's killed a deer in this town in 3 years," which I doubt that's true, but still, like, holy shit. She was just she was just so amazed that we were down there to hunt deer, and we did not kill any deer.
So that leads into the DEERPRESSION.
Oh, yeah, DEERPRESSION.
If those trips would have been a little bit better, then maybe we wouldn't be so down in the dumps. But since those were bad.
Yeah, I mean, that was Ethan's 3rd trip to Kentucky this year. I went on the first 2. We did archery opener for Velvet. We went out down for muzzleloader. That's when Born Again Matt killed that stud. And then he just went this weekend for rifle opener. 3 trips invested down there. Minimal content. I mean, Ethan did miss a really good buck on film. And I had a close encounter with a really good buck archery weekend. But we were so juiced up on this property and this farm because the summertime trail cam pictures that we were getting.
There's multiple shooters in the fields every single night.
It was a beautiful thing. We had 6 or 7 bucks on the hit list that were mature shooter class animals. And then every night we were watching the cell cameras during the summer. There'd be velvet bucks out in the beans. So we just had this impression that it was going to be something that it ended up not being. We got down there, like I said, I did have my close encounter with the buck. You've obviously seen that and heard about it already, but it just wasn't as action-packed and event-filled as we kind of were hoping it would be. And I doubt Ethan's going to go back down again this year. We're probably done with the property until turkey season. I would assume he'll go back down. It's just kind of a kick in the balls, and that leads into where we're at here now. So we're in the 2nd week of November here in Ohio. We're going to talk a little bit about Isaac's situation this week. Isaac has had a long week. Today is 1 week since the event unfolded that we're going to talk about.
Was it last Saturday?
Yeah, and I will let him.
Sunday.
Was it Sunday?
So almost a week ago.
It was Sunday.
Yeah, it was Sunday. No.
Oh, no.
No, it was Saturday. Well,
then why the heck would he work the next day? It was like Monday or Tuesday.
It was Sunday. I was the same night.
Yeah.
It was Sunday.
All right. Regardless.
Anyways.
It was a work night. That's what was another thing.
Yeah. So last Sunday, we had a very, very eventful day here in the deer shop. And it started off with, I actually decided to sleep in that morning. I was going to let Isaac and Ethan hunt the farm. So I skipped the morning hunt, spent time with the family, naturally got a phone call or text message about, 8 o'clock.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start the morning.
Yeah, I'll let Isaac go.
So the morning started out just like any other morning around here when we're getting up to hunt. Alarm goes off, get up, coffee, blah, blah, blah. Ethan lives here at the house with me, and he wasn't moving, which he was going to sleep in, whatever. He wasn't going to hunt. But the problem with that was where I was hunting, I needed a ride to. So I needed to be dropped off at this field because there's nowhere to park. And I didn't want to leave my truck, way down the road and have to walk and blah, blah, blah. I didn't want to park in the field that I'm hunting on. So I decided to go to a different stand.
Corn was cut the night before.
Yeah.
Half the field.
Yeah, so the field I was hunting on, they cut half the corn. I wasn't really hunting on the field, probably 25 yards off of it.
Yeah, maybe 40, 50, but
Well, anyways, slow morning so far. Does. Seeing the one spike that we've always been seeing. Sitting there pretty cold. Then all of a sudden I hear, the typical right in front of me. And I look forward, binoculars. And boom, it's one of the 8-pointers that I wanted to shoot. He's probably a 4-year-old one, just maybe 120, maybe under, maybe over.
He's a 4-year-old, 120, 130-inch, heavy, bully horned 8-pointer.
You'll be able to see in the video whenever that comes out.
I hope when you're listening to this podcast on Monday, I hope that the video was live Sunday night. If I can get the video edited up tomorrow.
So maybe you can see the buck. Maybe you have to wait for the next week. But anyways, he comes in. He kind of skirts me a little bit. Oh, this is
brand new stand we hung this year.
Yeah, and it's a shitty ladder stand. So if anybody's hunted these shitty ladder stands before, it's one of those stands that it's just a seat and a metal seat at that. There's no pad on it, which also sucks.
The squirrels killed it.
And then a tiny little platform that doesn't connect to the tree. So
it's a gun hunter stand.
Yeah, it's a gun hunter stand with a shooting rail and everything. Right. So I have to get up, kind of shimmy in the stand. It's making all sorts of noise. Blah blah blah. He's coming at me. I get the binoculars on him. I see which buck it is. I knew exactly which buck he was, that he was a shooter. Get my cameras on, which is a whole nother thing. And I had my single pin sight set at 20 yards because where I was hunting close quarters, all these deer were going to be 15 yards for a shot. And he ended up skirting a little bit to what I thought was 27, 28 yards. Stops in one of my lanes. And it's a super tight lane. Like I got like a square foot to shoot through.
The video makes it look worse than it was, but
yeah,
because of camera angle.
Anybody films, they know my camera was way down, so the camera's looking through the brush. But I got like a solid square foot to shoot through.
Pie plate.
27-yard shot. Aimed a little bit high with my 20-yard pin. Yeah, pretty much pie plate. Aimed a little bit high with my 20-yard pin. I figured it would, sink right down in there, and he would duck into it and be perfect. I shoot. I hear a little thwack, but as I shot, I could see my arrow look like it was going low, but it sounded good. He acted like he got hit and then ran off. So then, I text the guys, text Caleb, tell him everything. I'm like, well, I think it was good. 27-yard shot. Shouldn't have been too difficult.
I shot out of bed, like shot out of bed, went and made coffee. Like I'm heading over to the farm, see a never wife.
Do an interview with my camera, blah, blah, blah. I get down probably an hour later, maybe half hour later, check my arrow, check the sight just to make sure I hit him. And then the arrow was telling of the story before we even really knew the story. Arrow was covered in a little bit of blood. Fletchings were pretty clean, but there was a little bit of blood. It was like 360 on them, but not like it got through the chest cavity. So I'm like, shit. I don't know what I did. I hit him low, hit him high. But there's blood everywhere.
Yeah.
Like a considerable amount of squirting blood. So I looked to see where he went. He, went down this hill. So I'm like, all right, we'll go back to the house, review the footage. Of course, I got the shot on film, slow-mo, the whole 9 yards. And when we were watching this shot back at this shop, you could see it looked like I missed him.
Yeah, like the arrow, like the deer standing there, and the arrow's coming, the arrow's coming, the arrow's coming, the arrow's coming, and the trajectory is like
goes below
the deer. We're like, oh shit, and then naturally he starts to duck a little bit, and there's an impact. The problem is with the camera off to the side, what are those bushes called?
I don't know what
they're the ones you can literally just rip out of the ground. Like their root system's really bad. They got the little tiny green leaves and lots of stuff. Whatever it is, that bush, your arrow hits some of that.
Yeah, and like in the morning light and like everything fast, I didn't even see that shit.
Right.
I saw brown
deer.
deer.
We had that video on replay for 2 hours.
Yeah, 2 hours.
It did not stop replaying.
On that
Slow-mo,
TV right there.
Right here.
Looping.
And if I wouldn't
you could watch it a million times.
If I wouldn't have found the blood, I wouldn't think I hit him. From the video, I was I missed him.
Yeah, you show anyone the video, they're going to be like, no. Like you either missed him or you just hit him in the leg. Yeah,
it's almost one of those videos where you can make yourself believe in whatever you want on where that arrow went because you can't actually physically see it. It just
the one thing we can agree on that you couldn't make up is that it was a good shot. It was not a good shot.
Yeah, unfortunately,
it did not go into the chest cavity.
So for the audience that hasn't watched the video, The shot was in front of the front legs. So
And
it was
low.
It was too far forward and low. So brisket, chest, armpit of the front leg, the front pit of the front leg type area, just not ideal. You can kill a deer there with the proper angles, especially if you're from the ground maybe, but being elevated 20 feet in a tree stand and the way things went down, after we watched the video on repeat for 2 hours, we were really not feeling that good about it.
And then while I was picking up the arrow, I found out the shot was 36 yards.
Yeah,
so I was way out. I don't know how.
Which is weird because I feel like you do a pretty good job.
Yeah, and I usually do, and I don't know why. I don't know why in that situation, I estimated so bad on the yardage.
I just
And
know.
usually I estimate over. So if he was 36, I would have guessed him at 40. But for some reason, I thought he was under 30. So, anyways,
Well, I think his body, he was a big deer, the first time you had an encounter with a deer like that this year, a big mature buck.
And I had just watched a spike go through at 20 yards, so maybe the body size comparisons is what screwed me up. But regardless, a couple hours later, I went out
By
myself, sneaking through the woods on this blood trail because we've always been told if it's a back gut shot, anything like that goes through some sort of organs, you leave them 12, 24 hours, whatever you have to, and you go find them dead. If it's a shoulder shot, frontal shot, neck shot, you want to get another arrow in them. So I went out, sneaking around the woods by myself, followed this blood trail, and it was a pretty decent blood trail for about 200, 250 yards into some thick shit. He never bedded. The blood trail stayed pretty consistent, and it did look like there was bubbles in it. That was the weird part, which Caleb ended up seeing later.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely.
And I don't know how there was from. I don't know. Maybe
we kept talking. We were trying to convince ourselves it was windpipe. The ironic thing is that area is where you shot that deer is where the deer that I did shoot in the windpipe, Dad's buck, 2021, my last Ohio big buck actually. He died right there, 50, 60 yards from where that tree stand is from a windpipe shot. And it took him a long time to die, and I actually had to get a finishing shot in him during the track. He wasn't, I don't know how much longer he would have lived, but he was in pretty bad shape. But yeah, he got shot windpipe in that area, and he lived 4 or 5 hours. So we were hoping that Isaac's arrow, when it came across the front of the brisket, in front of those legs, arteries, windpipe, something detrimental to the deer.
now looking back, it's probably more likely just a muscle shot and
Lots of dripping blood.
Yeah.
And we've had, and we should know better. I don't want to come across like we're a bunch of amateurs up here. We're definitely not professionals, but we have had lots of brisket shot on deer that have lived and bled like crazy. It's not a new thing. We've had them on film. We've filmed brisket shots that we've tracked blood for 300-400 yards. It was really, really good, and never found a deer because they don't die from that. It's for one, it's down, it's low. Very venous, muscular this time of year. That the buck's running around. That's a very muscular area. You pierce that with a 2.5-inch, 2-inch broadhead, they bleed like crazy from that, but they don't die.
Which was also strange about this because I was shooting Grim Reaper broadheads, which are over the top mechanical, so they don't open up until they hit.
Go like
deer.
this instead of rear deploy. It's front.
So I don't know how that worked. How it sliced him with
the
that
problem is you hit brush. His leg was kicking. He was ducking. There was like 5 moving parts plus the arrow.
It was so hard to see.
And the arrow was buried in the ground, so it didn't hit anything.
Your bow's
solid.
shooting what, like 290?
It's shooting pretty quick for
You
a
have
pretty heavy arrow.
Decently heavy arrow, yeah.
But I mean, it was buried in the ground, and the fletchings had blood on them. So I don't know if it was just a pure flesh wound or what. But to keep going with the story, he went into this thick ass bedding area. We decided back out.
Yeah.
Give him the day. See what happens. We were going to come back.
We called a drone.
We called a drone, which it was Chris Toth, Skyhound.
He's been on this podcast. He's helped a lot of people locally.
So he's kind of a mutual friend of ours. So we called him. He came out that morning, and we couldn't see shit.
He got here about 11:30.
Yeah.
Because he had to work.
Noon.
He had to work around noon or something.
Yeah.
He works for the FAA, so he's very professional with all this
So
stuff.
he came out with his drone. We couldn't find shit.
Because everything was red. Like, he's up in the air
Too much
flying. Too much sun. The ground vegetation's all warmed up at this point. I mean, the drone's up in the air, and if you've ever watched one of those videos, everything was red, glowing. We did find like one. I think we found one doe laying down, but
so we had a plan for him to come back after dark.
Yeah.
Came back to the shop, continued our Saturday. Some people went out hunting. We'll go to Ryan now. 'Cause he decided to go out hunting. What else did we do?
That was the end of yours.
Yeah.
We were done at that point. I guess we can go to Ryan. I was going to talk about my situation here, but
Well, this is all after his.
well, there's.
It's all kind of intertwined.
We'll go to
whatever
I will let from that point we'll go on to the evening hunt and then Ryan. So Ryan went out hunting that evening.
Yeah. And I'm kind of mixing up weekends because I can't remember if Sunday was one of the days that I slept in myself. But Sunday evening I went out. Actually, I believe I was out all day because we had the east-southeast wind.
I just know the Packers got destroyed by the fucking Lions.
I didn't catch 1 second of that game.
Yeah, I was hunting that night, Sunday night, the night after. So he did kill his. That situation happened a Sunday morning. We had the Toby podcast scheduled for Sunday at 11. Canceled that. We're going to have Toby Hughes from Buckmasters on. Canceled that. I ended up went and sat with Nick at his farm. Didn't even want to hunt our farm because of all the shit that had been going down. I went and sat with Nick, watched the Packers get killed by the Lions in the tree stand. You were hunting one of your satellite farms that night.
Right.
Okay.
Well, because that was, I actually, now I do remember because that Sunday morning we came back here, we threw in my card.
Yes. We
Because
watched some video.
We watched some of the video. This is my first year filming,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
I have found to be slightly challenging, we could say. But at the same time, there's also different aspects, and not to go off on a tangent on that of, I'm not used to filming on something that's a screen's this big. So I'm trying to zoom in on a deer and make the screen the whole deer, which I figured out is probably not a real good.
Yeah, you always have to imagine it on the TV.
Yeah, right.
So the deer can be little.
Look how small that player is on the screen right
Yeah.
there. That's what the deer can be.
It's fine.
So that, the learning curves of going through that. But I had a really good Sunday morning hunt and then got pretty juiced up when we found out Isaac stuck one. Obviously wasn't sure until I got back here and we watched
Yeah,
it.
you came here to the shop.
And we went through the whole, charade of dealing with the uncertainties of what happens when you're bow hunting. Mm-hmm. So I went back out Sunday night. We had a weird, east wind coming in, and
It's been that way for a while now here.
it
won't
seems to
end.
be coming in a little bit more.
Is this an El Nino year? Is that
I don't
why?
know. I don't remember this many east winds. The east
I mean,
wind-
it's 60 plus degrees.
We had it today.
With east winds in November.
Yeah.
Like,
We'll hit that a little bit at the end, but the east
Yeah.
wind
So
fucked me today
this
too.
this wind is really not the best wind for my set. But it's rut.
Yeah.
Deer are moving,
And these deer come from where you don't think they're going to come
Yeah,
from.
exactly. And that's
especially this time of year, yeah.
I'm not going to, go into too many bores of the hunt, but I saw a ton of deer. I had a buck come in that I thought was a buck that I saw earlier in the morning, which was a deer that I had basically made sure I was not going to shoot. It ended up being a separate deer. Apparently, I have a lot of twin deer over on this farm.
Yeah, and that's kind of common for
Yeah.
farms to have similar.
So this buck comes in. I got a picture of him on one of my cell cameras before he made it in, and I'm like, oh, I could talk myself into ending my season right now, kind of making a joke. And then I look at it. He's got a broken 3, which was different than the buck that was earlier. Then I get eyes on him. I was videotaping him at this point of the hunt, and deer are everywhere. And he ended up going down into a valley, and I'm kind of sitting on like a knob where a valley turns, and I can basically see 50, 60 feet down, which is pretty high for where we hunt. And he started running around, and then I familiarized myself with another buck, which is a 9-point that is one of my fringe deer. He's probably the second biggest consistent deer I've seen on the farm. And it kind of got to a point where he looked a little bit bigger, in my opinion, in person, which some people might laugh at me when I say that. But
Hey, everyone hunts for their own reasons.
I don't have a wall full of monsters, and I would have been happy shooting him. He would have been my biggest bow kill. And so it's getting pretty dark, and there was a smaller buck that was up on the ridge that he could not visibly see. And I'm looking down pretty far at him and this broken tine buck. And this other buck's grunting up on top of the hill. And he almost acted like it was like he could tell like a human was like hitting a grunt. And he was very alert.
Yeah,
It took him a long time to kind of walk up the edge of that knob, and it's getting real dark.
These deer are so used to this guy's like every time they see guy sees a deer in the distance, he starts.
I found it interesting
toot
just from
flute.
the fact that I had so many deer around me, I could hardly move, let alone try and act like I'm going to hit a grunt with multiple bucks within eyesight.
Yeah.
That's not a good recipe. So he comes up the edge of this, knob of this valley, and he starts turning and making his way to me. It's getting really dark. I know that basically filming it's out of the question based on where he came up. I have a second tree, so 360 could be an option, but based on where he was, and I could have maybe hit record and prayed that it was, maybe going to. So big difference in me and Isaac's situation is I have no camera footage to go off of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he starts walking this ridge, and when I say I rushed the shot, I know I kind of talked about this with our group chat. I didn't rush the shot where I physically rushed it. It's that I basically should have allowed him to continue along this ridge to give myself a better chance to where if I would have probably been shooting like 11 yards instead of like 27. So similar to
27 is still a good.
It's a good shot. He was broadside.
Yeah, we're happy with 27-yard broadside.
My deer would be hanging in there if it was a 27. He was 27 yards away.
So
the shot placement.
He was rutting pretty hard at that other buck, and he was staring straight down at him. And I kind of had this feeling like he was going to bolt down the valley. And I don't know why I had that feeling, because looking back at how steep it was, I mean, unless you get shot at, you really shouldn't run down that. I mean, I know they're deer, but it's like a vertical drop.
Yeah.
And there's basically nothing that says that he wouldn't have continued on. So I draw back. I got a couple minutes left to shoot. I take the shot, and I didn't hear a great thwack. I wasn't even 100% sure that I hit him.
Yeah, Isaac's at least you could hear the.
I was very, within a couple seconds, you have a lot of commotion. You've got deer running off. That other buck I can visually see standing at the bottom of the valley. I audibly heard him kind of run around that knob on the base of the valley. It almost sounded like I heard him stop running, which made me think I missed him even more. And I can see my knock sitting on the side of the, kind of stayed up on the top of the ridge. And so I gave it some time. I was trying to have that other buck take off. He wasn't. I actually just started grunting and snort wheezing at him just to try and get him to run off. I couldn't have you drive up in the cornfield.
Yeah, we'll talk about that tonight too.
So eventually I just packed up. I got down, and initially I grabbed my arrow. I didn't even know if I hit him. And I started looking at it. It had this weird grazing, greasy kind of
which makes sense.
Residue.
Looking at it now, it makes sense. Silver skin, you know.
Along the shaft, and then a little bit of blood on the fletching, and a little bit of hair jammed into. I shoot Rage Mechanical, and into like the plastic, piece where it meets
the jacket or the collar.
The collar, and so I'm not, I don't feel real good about it, and I started letting the guys know that I shot. There was a neighbor that ended up coming over and started helping me track the deer, because obviously I know I hit him and probably passed through him with a little blood on the fletching. Where it turned into decent blood, we went about 50 yards and backed out. And I came back here.
Yeah, that's where
full DEERPRESSION mode.
So that's
which leads into like kind of the whole drone aspect.
Yeah, so
of where we're gonna go, but whatever you want.
So on that day, on that Sunday, now, here in the deer shop, when someone, one of the deer shop guys, are guys that are in our videos or our family or guys that are on the podcast, our extended group of friends, someone shoots a buck, it turns into an event. Well, now on that Sunday, we're past the evening hunt. We have 2 bucks that are wounded at this point. We have Isaac's buck from the morning, Ryan's buck. So we got 2 guys in the shop with track jobs that are needing to be figured out. I was already super sad from the Packers game. I think the Browns got their ass kicked too, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the football mood was bad. I'm sure I know for a fact everyone lost their parlays. No one won any bets that day. So we come back to the shop. Chris Toth, Skyhound Drone Recovery. I had already called him at 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning. He had come out to look for Isaacs during daylight. He had to go to work that night, but he said he gets off work at 9. He'll shoot back here, and he'll track Isaac's deer first. At this point, he didn't even know about Ryan's deer. He'll track Isaac's deer first. Another neighbor of one of our guys, so Tyler and Nick have their lease. A neighbor to that lease called Tyler that afternoon and said that he had shot a buck and jumped it up while tracking him. He thought he made a really good shot, but there was no blood trail, and he jumped him up once, so he backed out. He needed a drone. So Tyler's like, hey, who's your guy's guy? So Chris agreed to do that drone trip as well. So not only was Chris coming out here to drone Isaac's deer, he was also coming out to drone a deer a couple miles away next to a lease we have, followed by this when he pulls in the parking lot here, Ryan bombards his window, be like, hey, I got a third track job for you.
I did ask him what his morning looked like.
Yeah, right.
I wasn't expecting anything.
He's actually kind of a night owl, I think. He likes to do them all at night because he works second shift, so he works like noon and 8, somewhere around that time frame. So like he'd rather be out till 2, 3 in the morning than sleep till 11.
Plus the conditions for droning are way better at night.
Yeah, especially now that the leaves are off and it's cooler, nighttime drone, perfect. So we actually end up going down the street to launch the drone on one of our neighbors' properties.
Closer to where we last knew the deer was. End of the blood trail, basically.
Actually, we missed that part of the story. Me and you, after the drone had come in and left for the day, before Ryan's evening hunt, me and you went back and tracked manually.
For another 50, 60 yards, not very far.
No, we found one bed, and then we kind of lost blood for a while, did a circle, found where he had exited a thicket, still moving. So there was only one possible bed, maybe one place where he stood for a while. Marked that last blood left. So we got a hold of that landowner who was actually there at the property while we were tracking, and then hunted that evening. He didn't see anything. Got a hold of that landowner. He let us drive into his property so we could launch the drone from a closer perspective. So Chris gets here. We all drive over side by side, 4-wheelers, all that shit, trucks to that property. Launch the drone. Find a buck right off the rip. We had to only be 200 yards from where this buck was laying.
Not the buck I shot.
Not the buck Isaac shot. A story we'll tell here in a minute. So Chris jumps off him real quick. You know, I wanted him to spend more time on that deer, but he's just like, nope, that's a 10-point. That's not Isaac's deer. So he flew off him, business. Found a doe or two, a raccoon, a couple. It's funny, the wellheads around here, those like 5 horsepower gas motors on the
whatever
the
they are,
they all glow. So we found 2 or 3 of those, and then up against the cattails. Ironically, it is literally the same exact place we tracked we came up with the 2020 buck. I think it was 2020 when you wounded.
2019. It was the year I bought my bow, and I remember it was 2019.
So it was the same year that I killed Traveler, Nick killed Ned, all that shit?
Yeah.
So 2019, Isaac wounded a buck that ran literally the same trail through all this stuff, went through this big cattail marsh. Chris ends up finding a buck, which was your buck, laying next to this cattail marsh. Laying down, setting his head down, kind of just
under a big tree, so we couldn't get a full look at him, but we were about 95% sure it was this buck.
He obviously marked the spot, said, we're pretty sure this is your buck.
Buzzed out of there.
I got another track job to do, buzzed out of there.
He also didn't look great. I mean,
no, he didn't look like he was laying his head down.
He was laying his head down
like a dog, like a dog laying on your couch. Like
he had been alive for 12 hours at that point, roughly.
Yeah, you shot him
since the shot. Yeah,
7 something 8, and this was already
14 hours later.
I think there was a slight amount of optimism, even though he wasn't dead, in the condition that your buck.
So we were pretty optimistic that he was going to be laying there dead in the morning.
Yeah, and that was the plan. We're going to leave him overnight. We have the spot marked. Isaac knows exactly where it's at. Isaac's going to go back in the morning. All the guys head back to the deer shop. Me and Tyler jump in his gator and follow Chris to that second track job, which is the neighbor to Tyler and Nick's lease. So similar deer to what they're hunting over there.
So you were being helpful, but also being nosy.
Yeah, I was being nosy. But so this guy, his name is Scott. He helped us when Tyler shot G2 back in 2020. Tyler shot G2, big, huge, 153-inch 10-point, and it died on his property, and this Scott guy was nice enough to let us go in there and retrieve the deer. He took his tractor, drove through his own food plot, got all this stuff. He was very nice to us. So we've kept in contact with him since. Tyler farms his field. Tyler asked Scott, hey, because Tyler hooked Scott up with Chris for the drone job, and then Tyler said, hey, do you mind if me and Caleb bring our cameras, because that's what I do, bring our cameras and come hang out and watch the situation go down? And Scott said, no, that's fine. So we zing over there on the gator. We literally pulled into the yard, and Chris had already been there for maybe 5 minutes, and the drone had already taken off. We walk up to the truck, And Chris like zooms down with his camera and finds a doe sitting in a bed, zooms out. We say, hey, Scott, how's it going? Hey, man. This guy's very soft-spoken. He's like, hey, hope we find this deer. And Chris is all juiced up because he'd already found Isaac's. There's another red spot. He flies over. We'd been there for 45 seconds at this point. I'm standing there holding a beer, just like over top this guy's shoulder, totally invading his private space. But I was excited about it. Red spot, camera goes down light, just dead. His buck is just laying there dead as a doornail, just stone dead. And he'd been dead for a while. So there was all the rah-rah, the cheers, let it go, all the stuff. It's in the video you're going to see from this weekend. Chris obviously records. It's funny. I got word of advice for all you guys that call out a drone. They're recording the screen. The drone operators are recording the screen, everything that happens there. There's microphones on the controller. So everything that's being, everything that's being said around the operator is in the video. You can hear it. Like all the goddammits and motherfuckers and sons of bitch, it's all in there. But anyway, so we're recording that, and everyone's high-fiving. We're all happy for the guy. Then Chris, the drone operator, asks, "Hey, I have never gone and recovered a deer in the woods that I have found. Do you mind if I go with you, Scott?" And Scott said, "Yeah, that's fine." And then he looks at me and Tyler, and he's like, "You guys want to help drag this deer out?" And at this point, it's like probably 10:30, 10:45.
Yeah, probably.
It's pretty late. But I didn't have to work, and Tyler's like, "Let's fucking do this thing." So we took our vehicles back, and I know the area very well. I've tracked deer through this before. We tracked Tyler's buck through here before. I guess I kind of it had forgotten upon myself how large of an area. There's a buffer farm, so Scott's farm, our farm, and the buffer farm in the middle is probably a 100-acre chunk of woods. So there's a lot of, and it's a rectangle. So we probably ended up having to drive 200-300 yards into the woods and then walk another 200-300 yards to find the deer. We found the deer, took a bunch of pictures, got it gutted out, started dragging all that. It was a very, very, it was a very good buck, by the way. Probably, I mean, without his junk, he was probably a high 140s 10, low 150s 10, and he had some junk. So he's probably a mid 150s, pushing 160 class.
He was a nice,
11 point, very nice deer. A deer that we didn't recognize initially. After sending out some pictures to Nick, we do recognize it as a buck we called the 6x7, who was a 3-year-old last year, like probably a 130-inch 3-year-old with a lot of tines last year. Blew up, 4-year-old, like I said, 160 class buck. So we knew the buck, which was cool. Me and Scott did the drag out on him, and it was second buck I've had to drag out this year that wasn't mine, and I love doing it. But this was a lot harder of a drag than the first one. The first one was Born Again Mats, and we had a deer cart. It was like 600 yards, but it was with a deer cart. This was 300 yards through like the brush in the woods, but it was good for the soul. During that track job, I actually found this guy, which we weren't sure which buck it was at first, but it looks like it's a deer that we call Flyer 8, which is a deer that Nick might actually try to kill tomorrow. He's been hunting. This is a deer that's on Nick's radar, but he might actually get mad at me for saying that in the podcast. But
too bad.
Anyways, we got a cool podcast or a cool souvenir from
Maybe
that.
he'll be dead.
He actually did say he's not hunting tomorrow because he never remembers a time where he went hunting in the rain and said, "I'm glad I did this."
That's true.
So
but
it's supposed to rain tomorrow.
I actually have another shed from same buck we call Flyer 8. So this is 2 years, 3-year-old, and then this year he's a 4-year-old. And
he's a
we
stud.
figured this year the year that I'm showing on the camera, if you're watching on YouTube, the shed I found.
Mid-20s.
Yeah, like I had him 122 to 127. It's an 8-point with a tiny G4 as a 3-year-old. So this year as a 4-year-old, he's probably mid-40s, pushing 50 maybe. He's not very wide. The problem is he has very long beams, and he's tall, but he's not wide. So
big 8.
So there's that. So that's a cool consolation prize. We got to find Scott's deer. I found shed off a buck that we have a lot of history with that we really enjoy watching and want to kill in the future. So, that story went actually very well, and you'll be able to see that in the Deer Camp Chronicles episode coming up. That was a really cool part of the night. And then Chris leaves us and goes to Ryan. At this point, he left us at 11:47
I'm trying to think
or
of what
12.
time.
It was like after midnight.
I think we roughly started the drone search around 1.
Yeah, because I think when Alex called me, his brother Alex, who's been on this podcast, one of the tagged out guys that is not part of DEERPRESSION, He called me like I think it was like 12:30 or 12:47. He's like, "Hey, you're not coming to track this deer?" And I'm like, "Bro, it's 1:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
Like, I've had a great night, and I gotta go home. I got a child I gotta take care of in 5 hours. Like, but anyways,
So we went back over, and I think I had shot around 5:40 last Sunday, which would have been within the last 8 to 10 legal minutes of light. So it was about 1 in the morning, so it had been 6 hours roughly since the shot until we started the search. And given the logistics of where I'm hunting, I expected it to be relatively quick. And as I gave him kind of the location of the stand, location of last blood, and we started tracking through, it started looking less optimistic. I was kind of getting a little bit sad. We did locate some deer, and this would also be a great way to just talk about the efficiency of the drone. At night, it was incredible. You can just tell by the size of the thermal image if it's a coon, a deer,
squirrel, possum,
whatever it is.
A wellhead.
So we did locate some deer, and he continued, going on through this valley, which is, had I gone on foot and continued to try and search, I'd have been heading down through this valley for God knows how long in the wrong direction. So I started telling him, like, man, this isn't looking good. Chris goes, I'm not even close to done yet, man. I'm trying to think if he did do a battery change.
No, you told us he did a battery change.
Yeah, he flew in.
Because I asked you an update. I was laying in bed, fucking 1:30 in the morning. Hey, any update? And you're like, battery change now.
He flew in, did a battery change. Again, conditions were perfect. He went off into another block of woods, which is very, very close to where I have permission, and he did end up locating the deer. And the deer sitting there, his ears were pinned back.
He was laying down.
He's got a predominant G4 on his left side that basically identified him. He was laying down. Pretty big body I believe he's a 3-year-old 9.
Yeah, not any older than 3, but you know how those 3-year-old bucks can outgrow their rack a little bit body-wise and look chunks.
He
looked, they look like chunkers.
Because I have a couple coworkers and stuff I shared some of the drone pictures of, whether I took pictures of screen or he sends a video of what we saw.
Yeah.
And so he ended up, he's looking straight up at the spotlight on the drone.
Yeah.
And he ends up standing up, which then allowed us to see the side that I shot.
Yeah, it's weird because sometimes you want them to stand up and move.
Right.
To see. Like, I noticed that Chris with Isaacs, we saw him laying there. He's like, I don't want to spook this deer. Like, I get any closer to 130 feet, like he might get up and start moving. Because we knew his shot that he had and stuff, and we didn't want him to go anywhere. We wanted him to stay where he's at. Whereas yours, you weren't sure where you hit him at all, really. So, like, if the deer gets up and moves around, the drone can see. Yeah, what kind of shot it was.
My initial thought process, which I guess it was part of what I forgot to say I think I forgot to say it when I was giving my initial on the hunt, was I initially thought low, and I was going top pin. I have a multi-pin sight, which is 20, and I basically, that is another part of what I maybe rushed, was under anticipating on that ridge that he could have been past 20, because most of it's close quarters on that hunt. He ended up being roughly, say, 26, 27. Did I say that? I can't remember. But
I think, yeah, you did, because we talked about 27 being a good hunt. Sidebar, is this the stand that I helped you, like?
No.
But, like, I remember scouting this.
Yes, maybe.
It's just south of that field?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Well, so in my head, because Isaac went with me, actually. I know and you're like, well, we picked out a spot, hung a stand, and you're like, I do still think you should put a stand in that tree. Put a stand in that tree. That's a tree that I was hunting.
That's the one way down on the ridge?
Yeah.
So like 50 yards from where we hung that one?
Yeah. So he ends up standing up, and we were able to see the entry wound, which was
straight arm.
straight arm down on the blade of the shoulder, which is kind of the flesh wound that I was kind of anticipating.
Especially so high up in the tree, the thing just boom, one leg. That's
and
it.
it makes a ton of
sense.
It looks like good bright red blood.
I found muscle because it's muscle.
I found a clot, physically in the blood. And then it just stops.
Yeah.
And this happens so many times. You can read them on forums. You can have people talk about it. I was fully anticipating this, but I was willing to, invest the money just to,
of course,
to verify that. So that's a situation that I found myself in, which leads more into the DEERPRESSION. Nothing hurts more than knowing you sucked than spending $400 to know you sucked. But hey, it was well worth it. I'd
Yeah.
highly recommend it to anybody. And if you're local, Chris is very good
Yeah,
at what he
we-
does. We were 3 for 3 on Sunday,
Yep.
And finding the
and
deer.
he's a cool dude, and he's gonna spend the time to find him.
Yeah, we've had Chris on this program. And it's funny. There's still a lot more to these stories before I get into
I know.
the bullshit session.
There's too much
yeah,
going on
there's,
with
there's
these
a lot
stories,
going on with the stories
so.
today. But I do want to talk at the end about drones and Chris and our view on them. But so this is 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. Ryan goes to bed. Chris goes home. The next morning comes along. Isaac sneaks in to this marked bed for his buck.
Yeah, I knew exactly.
Monday morning.
I knew exactly where this
Yeah.
bed was. I knew there was we got permission from the landowner that.
Yeah, actually, Ryan was able to. It's long story.
was
7
able to
degrees at Kevin Bacon. We all know
Yeah,
everyone in this township. We got permission to go on this other property and blah blah blah.
So I knew where this deer was bedded. He was kind of on a little ridge, I guess, overlooking these cattails.
Yeah, there's a right. By ridge we're talking a 10
foot,
8 to 10 foot elevation change, but it's above the lowland wet cattail area.
From what I found out after I was back there, he was actually below that. He was in the low, but outside the cattails.
Okay.
But anyways, I snuck in the cattails. I was sneaking glassing, hoping I would just see a white belly. Get to exactly where he was, find his bed, tiny bit of blood.
Yeah,
he's gone.
Dry
blood. Like he probably got up and left right after we did, I'm sure.
Yeah. We were where we were droning him though. We were far from him. There was no chance that we were going to bust him from where we were. But he probably went about his business.
Yeah, he was gone.
I would assume.
I was expecting, if he was gone, a huge pool of blood, something, and it was like maybe the bottom of a beer can. That was it.
The only thing that sucks is we have not had him on camera since. So
Yeah.
that was on the 4th.
Mm-hmm.
That was on the 4th. Today is the
9th.
So 5 days he hasn't been on camera.
So I'm hoping he's not dead in a ditch somewhere, but there's no way to tell, and that leads to the next story.
Yeah, that kind of segues to the next story. Some good news though, that buck, and I know we talked about it a little bit on our podcast a couple weeks ago. Born Again Matt was in here talking about his rise and fall and his wave of emotion. The buck that Born Again Matt hit on opening day that he couldn't find, that disappeared off camera for a month.
That we talked about on the Kentucky podcast.
Yeah, is alive.
He
got,
really?
Yep, that deer's alive. He got trail camera pictures of it. He was gone for a very long time, but he looks fine.
He still has his Ohio tag, right?
Yeah.
So he can have redemption.
I haven't told anybody this because there's been so much shit going on, but spoiler alert, Born Again Matt tried to draw on a 160 tonight and spooked him. Wasn't able to get a shot. I guess he had one of the best deer nights in the woods he's ever had, and he drew on a 160 and the deer spooked on the draw, and he sent me a trail camera video, and it's fucking awesome. But regardless,
anyways,
that segues into what we were talking about.
Ditch buck.
So a ditch buck situation. Chris, when he was out searching for Isaac's deer that night, the 4th, I briefly mentioned how he had found another buck, big 10 point, and got off him earlier in the night. If you are a follower of our podcast or our video series, you know that I have been hunting a deer for the last 2 years. I don't know how many times I've said his name on the air or really described him too much. We've kind of left it a little bit shrouded in mystery because we can't give everything away, just unfortunately because everyone kind of knows where we're at and all that. But I've been hunting a deer called the Wolf. Ryan just showed you here, and if you're watching the video, we have 3 of his sheds here from the last 2 years. It's a deer we've had a lot of documentation on. When he was a 3-year-old in 2022, me and Isaac filmed him multiple times, gave him the pass. He was a heavy 9 point at that year. Last year as a 4-year-old, he was a heavy 10, probably like low 140s, heavy 10. We have the sheds here. I had at least 5 or 6 stand encounters with him last year. Did a bunch of filming from the road, out of season and stuff. It's a deer we knew a lot about. Towards the end of the year, he was definitely our number 1 on the hit list. I ended up finding his sheds together. If you watch the shed hunting video or the prologue for Deer Camp Chronicles, his sheds were laying together in one of our food plots by him.
They're in the intro of the podcast.
They're in the intro of the podcast. There's actually a video of him walking in the intro of the podcast, too. So just a deer over the last couple of years that we have grown very fond of, a deer that we obviously would love to have harvested, a deer that means a lot to us here at the Deer Shop. he was around this season. I had an encounter with him on October 15th in the food plot. I was hunting the mega plot. Saw every buck on the farm that night. It was too dark to video, but he was in the plot with a bunch of other deer fighting and rubbing trees, and probably got to about 60 yards with shooting light, but just a great encounter. So from that point moving forward, he was obviously the deer that I was going to hunt. He's a 5+-year-old, 150 class, clean 10. There's nothing really special about him, but he's just a very good deer for our area.
Heavy.
He's heavy. He's compact. He's got long beams. Very good deer for our area. A deer that we have history with. It checks all the boxes of the kind of deer that we like to hunt.
Checks all the boxes for a deer that Caleb would get obsessed with.
Yeah, right. That's 100%. I had him on camera the night of October 24th, multiple cameras chasing does. He went into a cornfield. He was with a bunch of does in one of our food plots. He's all over the property. I hunted around that time frame. I never saw him. That was the last set of pictures I got of him on 10/24. A lot of period went by where he wasn't on any of our cell cams, wasn't on any of our normal cams. None of the neighbors had seen him. No one had seen anything around him. But it is rut, and last year he did leave this period of time for about a month. So it's not unheard of for him to be gone. The night that so that's Sunday the 4th, Isaac shot his buck. We potentially droned him. I cannot prove it for certain, but I'm 90% certain that we droned him. Not really actually far off the property line, probably only 150, 200 yards off the property line in our immediate area. He was bedded with 2 does. Chris did not spend a lot of time on him. He flew off, but it got my interest peaked because that was the 4th, and it had already been since the 24th that I had pictures of him. So I knew he was in the area. Things were good. I put a hard push in last week to hunt him. I mean, I hunted every opportunity I had. I hunted smart, but I hunted deep in the woods near those areas, bounced stands a couple times, got aggressive for mature bucks, the whole 9 yards with nothing. I had Spindles for the 4th time come in. If you watch any of the episodes coming up to this, you've seen Spindles do all in his grunting, snort wheezing, chasing does around in all our videos. Really good. The thing is, I think Spindles might be a 4-year-old, but
yeah,
he's just a deer that we have decided we're not shooting. So regardless, Spindles lives because I've been hunting the wolf. Isaac's deer had been gone. Isaac shot his deer on the 4th. Throughout the week, I started messaging local landowners, guys that hunt around us, hey, keep an eye out for this deer, send a trail camera picture. My brother hit him. We think he lived. We had drone, the whole story. One of the gentlemen that lives locally that I sent the picture to said, oh, there was a very big dead buck in the ditch in front of my house last week. Whoa, well,
very near where he was last potentially spotted.
Near A, where Isaac's buck was shot and was laying, and B, where he was on via drone, and not too far from our farm. I mean, we're talking maybe a mile or so, but that's nothing for these running deer. He said, hey, yeah, my friend saw a huge dead buck in the ditch last week. So I inquired a little bit more, and he said, he almost stopped and grabbed the antlers, but he was busy, something, and he kept going. So then, a day went by and it was festering with me real bad. So I made a post on our local hunters page. Hey, keep an eye out for my brother's deer. This is, a deer in Chatham that was hit. Looks like this. Also, I heard a buck got hit on the road, so-and-so area. Any information about that would be, we would love to hear anything more about that. And I had 4 or 5 people message me saying, yeah, I saw a big dead buck in the side of the road, saw a big buck, looked like this, looked like that. My mom saw this deer. And then I eventually had a gentleman message me, said, yeah, there was a pretty good sized deer dead on the side of the road. And I watched a guy in a white rusty van with a black bumper and a ladder rack stop in the middle of the road. He's like, this is why I can remember it. He stopped in the middle of the road, and this is a very busy state route. I had to slam on my brakes to go around him, and he was dragging a very large dead buck into the back of his van or into the side of his van or something. He was loading a big dead buck into his van sometime last week. So I can't say for certain that it is the wolf that was hit and killed, but the facts are we know that he was within 200 yards.
Couple hundred yards.
Yeah, 200 yards of that road on the 4th. Sometime between the 4th and about the 8th, this deer was hit and killed on the road, loaded up into a van. I still haven't had pictures of this deer since the 24th. So obviously nothing is set in stone, and he could show up at any moment and makes me look like a fool. But chances are the deer that I've been hunting for the last 2 years, the wolf, this 10-point right here, got hit by a car sometime last week, which explains his absence from all the cameras.
Let me throw a little sidebar into this podcast.
I need some whiskey for this one.
So that picture that I shared of Tipton's buck from 1024.
Yeah.
So a fellow guy that...
He shot that on 1024?
No. The picture was from 1024, which was the same day you said that you hadn't seen.
Yeah.
So I would say a friend, local affiliate, actually a former coworker, Caleb's, who shares a permission piece with me, killed a pretty heavy 10-point this morning. And he had not seen that deer since the 24th.
Yeah.
Ironically. So it had been several weeks. I just wanted to give Brandon a shout out. He's had great success over the last couple of years.
Yeah,
in
Brandon,
Ohio.
we haven't talked much over the last couple of years, but anytime you want to hang out, deer shop.
Yeah, I
talk
think
about
he's
these deer
a listener.
you kill a lot bigger deer than Ryan on the same time.
yeah. I told him that he'd get a shout out tonight, so I don't know if he's been listening, is listening. Good job,
Well, if
Brandon.
he's listening at the 57-minute mark.
Yeah,
he's a trooper.
I just want to say, just because you haven't seen him since the 24th, doesn't mean.
No, and
there's good reason to be sad, but this definitely ain't the biggest or the only big deer around that could have got hit.
No, but that's going off that information.
It's
by far this is the deer that has been the most dominant on the farm. He's by far the biggest deer we've had around this entire calendar year since January. This growing cycle of deer. By far, he was the dominant deer, the biggest one around. The fact that he's been gone, a big one was hit. All signs point. Well, obviously, he could be alive. We have umpteen stories in this deer shop of deer that got shot, disappeared, hit by car, gone for a year or two, come back. I mean, I'll throw Nick under the bus right now. The fucking zoo buck is still alive. For anyone that follows the Siman Brothers Outdoors shit, I've made rest in peace to the zoo buck videos
twice,
2 years in a row now, and that fucking deer is still alive with a hole in his leg. I can't even explain it. 6-7-year-old buck. I mean,
well, the thing that doesn't help
the deer
with this
are
situation
amazing,
is the fact that the night before,
right,
where the location,
right. We know he was very close to the road.
That's what makes
with does, which would could cause him to do some stupid shit like run out in traffic and get killed. Like the most famous deer we've ever had in the shop here, Hook. He did the same. He died on the same fucking stretch of road, which is what it is. But so that's our Sunday night deerpression story.
I can't read. Caleb's,
You're never gonna be able to read my notes.
I can't read Caleb's handwriting.
You're not.
So I'm not trying
secret
to
notes because you
I
can't
don't
read
want to front run him on stepping off onto the side here.
No,
I'm gonna just say something real quick. For me.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this, you have a situation like mine or Isaac's, which are actually pretty similar. Outside of the fact that
I feel like mine's worse, but okay. Because we don't know if my deer's dead. We know yours is living.
Okay. Well, we think.
Oh, speaking of, that's one of the things I've written down here. You got trail cam video of what we thought was the deer a couple days ago. So 4 or 5 days removed.
It was 4 days later.
He's not even showing. And
if it's
what do we know? But
that was the other part.
He doesn't even look wounded.
And that's what leads me. That's what led me down a whole nother road. Is that why he looked bigger? Because it was a different deer? I don't know. But into the DEERPRESSION state. Whatever, I had a hell of a weekend last week. I was off work Friday. I hunted all weekend. I had really good hunts. I got an opportunity, which I know in our chat as we talk amongst ourselves, like Dylan, a guy with a wall full of big deer. He asked, give me one chance a year. And you might not even get that one chance. I didn't have a chance at a world record frickin' deer or even a 150, but a deer I was happy to suit my tag on. Obviously Isaac was, and we were unable to execute. Then my hunts since then have been full of no deer, leaf blowers, dog fights,
Ryan
and I have gone down a complete road of sadness right now. And I do need to get myself out of it. No one feels bad for me. It is what it is. You got to overcome the obstacles, but you get that opportunity, you don't execute on it.
It feels pretty shitty.
It feels shitty. I'm trying to find a way to pull myself out of it. If you're going through the same situation, you don't have a platform to vent about it to the world.
Yeah, at least we have some people to cry to.
Yeah. No one wants to hear it, but it's unfortunate because you never know what's going to come after that situation. So just do your best to stay calm and execute. I'm not the best at it, obviously, but that's
one thing I have written down here that I wanted to talk about. Isaac, if you know anything about Siman Brothers Outdoors or the deer shop, like you've obviously, Isaac is known as kind of our archery guy. Since he was very young, he's been a fucking really good archery shot. And honestly, his target shooting has gone down over the last couple of years because he's blind now.
I'm becoming blind.
Yeah, he's becoming blind now. He's the Simon curse is we can't see shit. Anyone knows he can't see shit.
But if I put my glasses on, I can shoot pretty well.
I mean, you go out and shoot targets in the yard. You want to throw $5 on who's going to get the highest score on seeing
You ever thought about
little three-shot
contacts,
shit?
motherfucker?
I got glasses.
Isaac is going to win every fucking time. He's going to laugh about it. It's just going to be second nature. But then you get into these hunting situations that they're high pressure, but not the highest pressure. I mean, I guess having an elk at 15 yards is pretty high pressure this year. But you get into these situations, and even with all that practice, being that good at shooting a bow, nothing's guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed in the deer woods. You could be the best shot in the fucking world.
And then the deer, hims instead of haws.
And
perfect shot, or you shoot him in the guts.
We were
because of
sitting
what
here,
he did.
And we love the guys. We were sitting here earlier eating pizza. Nick was in the shop before, we were doing our pre-podcast. Nick showed up for a while. Ethan was out here. Kendall was out here. Isaac's fiance. And we're just drinking some beer, eating some pizza, shooting the shit, watching some hunting videos.
It was a top 5 Heartland Bowhunter shot.
Heartland Bowhunter, and we love Heartland Bowhunter. There's nothing negative to say about them. They got the best. They have the best quality videos in the fucking game, and they have for 15 years. They got a buck at 60 yards, hunt suckers out there, and just fucking drops this arrow in, just smokes this fucking whitetail.
Well, he hits
if Michael Huntsucker came here and tried to shoot at a 115-inch 3-year-old at 60 yards, he would grab the arrow and throw it back at him and fucking laugh at him and run away. I mean, the deer are so pressured here. Nick made a comment earlier today in one of the group chats. I don't remember which one it was. He said something along the lines of, any deer in Ohio that makes it to 4 or 5 years old has been shot 3 or 4
multiple times.
3 or 4 times he has been shot. There's
there's
this false narrative people gain by watching great television like Midwest Whitetail and Heartland Bowhunter, Chris B., Bomars, Lukowski's, Drury, name it. Those deer are not getting shot at 20 times a year like the deer here.
Well,
I mean,
there's another video that we watched in that top 5. I mean, you ever seen a deer really truly respond
right.
to you calling at them? They run
180 inch
because they've got 100 people fucking rattling and grunting at them. Right. They know it's a human.
There was another video in that one for Heartland Bowhunter, and it's a beautiful video. It's awesome.
It's great.
There's everything about it's amazing. They shoot the world record 8-point. It's like 180.
Skylar Misrick.
Yeah, 187-inch 8-point. He sees him up on a ridge. He gets on his grunt tube, and this buck turns around, walks to his stand, he shoots at 15 yards. I mean, that will never happen here. I know there's going to be guys watching this podcast like, I did it the other day in Northeast Ohio. Okay, so it does happen sometimes, but I've been
happen to us.
I've been in the deer woods hunting hard since I was 12 years old. I've never hit a grunt call and had a mature buck come to my tree, and that's I'm talking thousands of hunts, 100 hunts a year. For the last, how old am I? 34. It's 22 years. 22 times 100 is what? 2,200?
That's a lot.
That's a lot of hunts. A deer I've never sat there and, done a little, and had a 140-inch buck come down range 12 yards and killed him. And I know that stuff does happen. And I've rattled in some deer. I've grunted in some deer. I've had some good times calling, but you watch a video like that, and you see these guys just do simple thing like, and a world record comes walking down the trail. To expect anything like that to ever happen to you is outrageous, and yeah, we love it. But
and I know we beat down.
That's just this area of Ohio that's just a way to. And then there's guys listening that hunt in Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and some areas in West Virginia who are like, bro, fuck yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about because we can't even do that stuff, and the deer we have are this big. Mm-hmm. The biggest deer we have is 100 inches. And
I know we beat down.
We feel your pain, brother.
The area that we hunt.
Yeah.
In that aspect of the.
Luke yells at me every day. The reason your hunting sucks is because you're fucking in the woods every day.
Yeah.
I know that. I know I'm fucking it up for myself, but I just love being in the woods.
Yeah,
Are we not going to hunt?
It's a battle of two edges, or a knife with two edges, or whatever the saying is.
So where do we go from here to cure our depression? What are your plans?
I was actually going to tell Ryan this. Ryan gave his last monologue, and
he gave his hoorah speech.
The people that don't have a platform, honestly, the answer is to just be in the woods and slow it down and just hunt, because at any moment this time of year, at any moment, things can happen that are unexplainable. A buck that you don't know, or maybe a fringe buck or something, gets on a hot doe, comes by at 15 yards and just doesn't give a fuck that you're up in the tree. You kill the biggest deer of your life just because you were in the woods. That can happen at any moment right now.
Right.
Literally any moment. Last year, God gave me a gift last year when he had Megatron, 150-inch fucking, I don't even know how many points that deer had.
Yeah, bizarre, non-typical.
Shows up on the, Thursday of gun season? Shows up on 4 or 5 of our trail cameras, and then I go in the woods and I hunt and I get a shot opportunity at him.
You miss him 3 times.
Which I missed 3 times, so that adds to the deerpression. But so you never know when that could happen to you. It happened to me. It could happen to you. It could happen to any one of us at any time.
Right.
Isaac, actually, let's talk about tonight's hunt.
Well, tonight, that's what I was going to talk about a little bit. To try to cure our deerpression, we were going to go shoot some does. That was kind of our plan tonight. Let's go shoot some does. Me, you, Luke.
Anything that could happen. Like if a doe comes in and she's by herself, she's getting fucking whacked.
So we were going to shoot some does, and of course, I don't see any does. I see one of the other 8-pointers that I made the decision to shoot.
I think that deer's good.
Yeah. Anyways, he came running in. He came from the road, the complete opposite way, straight downwind for me with our crazy east wind we have going. He stopped straight in my wind tunnel. Not looking at me, though. He's looking at the neighbors. Mowing the lawn. Dogs
Weekend in Northeast Ohio. Yeah. You're going to hunt, leaf blowers, mowing the yard.
They're in the yard.
Walk. We had dog walkers on trail camera tonight. I mean.
So a combination of the neighbors fucking around, him probably smelling me, blah, blah, blah. He runs. I mean, he doesn't snort and creep off. He turns around and runs. And I can watch him through my binoculars through the field.
Like 500
for 500 yards. Running. Immediately straight away from me for 500 yards, runs across another road, almost gets hit by a car, and I lost sight of him, and he's in Alabama. He was running south.
Luke went out tonight. Luke, who never appears on the podcast. There is a fourth brother. Luke, who never appears on the podcast. He filmed. That deer. I think that deer's better than he looks in the film, even. Regardless,
he had a neck on him like this.
Dude, his fucking neck. A mature 130 class 8-point, heavy, long beams, just good deer. Luke filmed him for 20 minutes tonight, chasing does around eating corn in a field. Ironically, 200 yards from where I was sitting, and I didn't see shit. But the deer are still there. There's still opportunity. I mean, all the things can still happen. So during the rut, every day's a new day.
I'm going to cure mine by going to Pennsylvania, hunting the mountains, and not seeing any deer for a couple days.
Yeah, but how rewarding would it be to kill a nice mountain deer?
So,
it feels fucking good.
I'll give other people the cure. If you're the average Monday through Friday working man like myself, all you got to do is go through fire school, basic school, become a medic, join a full-time fire department.
2 years of testing.
Get tons of time off like these.
Well, you got to get it. Then you have to accrue seniority in your department for more vacation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, you guys deserve
I mean,
your
to
time
get
off.
there, I had to work a minimum wage private job for 7 years.
I worked for a funeral home.
Yeah.
I worked for
So did
a
I.
funeral home.
You guys well
for
deserved
5
it.
years. I picked up dead bodies and hauled them around.
Yeah.
You got to do your time.
Yeah.
You know, what
Put
I'm
your
saying?
time in. So for me, it gets a little bit. That's where my deerpression goes a little bit more, and the guys that work Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing we didn't talk about, which happens everywhere. I think everywhere. I don't know if some states do it, but Sunday when we shot was daylight savings.
Oh yeah.
So if you had the opportunity to hunting after work and were able to skate out,
It's gone now.
it's pretty much gone.
Well,
So I'm kind of limited to the weekends, and that's probably most of the working man is limited to the weekends. So it makes your opportunities that much more futile.
you like to point out that I have the greatest schedule in the world, which
No.
I do.
I'm just
No, no,
fucking
no.
with you.
I 100% do, but I also have a wife that works full time still. Well, she works part time at 2 places, which is
That's full time.
Yeah, it ends up being fucking.
like the
more than
worst of
full.
both
I
worlds.
That's
know.
full time.
And guess who is the number one child care provider? So now that it gets dark at 5 o'clock, I can't even go out after work after her work anymore. So I'm right there with you, brother. But
Yeah. So
there's a huge stretch of days coming up, November 14th through the 19th. It looks like it's going to be kind of cold here in the northern area, like lows in the 20s and 30s, highs in the 50s. That 14 through 19 period is probably going to be when the biggest mature deer are out seeking.
It should be a good time for us. It'd be a good time for us here. We'll be
Yeah.
hunting heavy.
I'm going to give you a rut report. There's a lot of you're going to read on social media. You're going to go on forums. You're going to go on Facebook. You're going to go on Reddit. You're going to go all these places. They're going to say, "Oh my God, I saw 12 does tonight. Oh my God, the deer aren't chasing. I saw a spike went through. There's deer by this, deer by that." The rut is in full swing right now. There are deer breeding. The mature deer are breeding, and then they are going to get off that doe after they breed her 1 or 2 times over a 24 to 48 hour period, and they're going to seek like crazy, like the deer you saw tonight, like the deer Luke saw tonight. They are going to be seeking like crazy until they find the next receptive doe. If you're in a high deer density area, place like Northeast Ohio, where a lot of you listeners are, it doesn't take them very long to find another doe. So that's why some of your guys' hunts have been really fucking bad, is because mature bucks are locked in on their does, and they just don't have to look very hard to find
they have
another
a harem
one.
of does.
Right. So you're going to see a lot of deer that aren't ready to be bred, and a lot of young bucks that don't know what they're doing their kind of thing, out feeding in the fields, and you're going to think the rut is not happening. That's not true.
For the first
Get
time,
in the thick shit. Isaac was hunting on the edge of some really thick shit that we have a stand set up on. He went in specifically for that deer tonight, knowing that there was, and he saw him. The plan worked.
For the first time this year hunting, I didn't see any feeding milling about does.
Yeah.
For the first time. Usually I've been seeing 10 of them a hunt.
I went into a pinch tonight, a thick bottomland pinch. My goal was to get on either cruising or a buck locked on a doe. I ended up seeing 3 young does and a raccoon, and my hunt sucked. But Luke was only 200 yards from me out on an open field. He had the mature buck and 20 does. I couldn't see them from my vantage point. I thought my hunt was worthwhile or worthless and a waste of time, but Luke was literally right over the crest watching the open field. He had all the action.
Mm-hmm.
So
that shooter buck wasn't that far from you.
No, that shooter buck at times was within 100 yards of me. I just the vantage and the terrain.
And it would take nothing for him to come in.
Couldn't see it. So the hunts are happening right now. The deer are chasing, the deer are seeking. The rut is when you could take any hunter and make them good. At any moment, any of these deers can run by you. History can happen.
Yeah, keep hunting.
And if you had any inkling at all on Caleb's, excitement on deer, he was willing to drive over to his buddy's farm tonight.
Oh, yeah.
To drive his truck through the cornfield.
If you guys want to make fun of someone local, the locals want to make fun of a deer shop guy, I went and picked Nick up from his stand tonight. I literally drove up and picked Nick up from his stand tonight.
So he wouldn't bust all these deer
because
out.
He had 20 deer and the deer he was trying to kill out in the field. And Nick noticed something tonight too, and this is something for the rut report. Lots of does laying down. They came out in the field and they just laid down because they're fucking tired. They're tired of being run around, even if they're not ready to be bred or if they've been bred already. They're tired of being pushed around relentlessly for 28, 48, 72 hours. He saw at least 5 or 6 does tonight that just lay down in the field and just basically bed during daylight hours in the open because they're just tired.
Right.
The deer, so to give a little insight on, he's going to kill me. To give a little insight on Nick's night, he texted me, he's like, you need to come fucking rescue me because his number one shooter buck, a doe came out after he probably could have shot, but not legally. Legal shooting hours were over. Doe bed down 50 yards, cut cornfield, laid down in the middle of the field, and his number one shooter buck just stood over her like a fucking statue for 30 minutes and wouldn't leave. So I actually had to drive through the cornfield to spook him off and go pick up Nick from his tree.
Because if anybody, I mean, people should know this, but the deer aren't exactly scared of these vehicles like they are. Farmers are in the fields all the time, combines.
But a fat guy with a beard starts clinking his metal around his tree stand.
They're gonna know something's up there.
Yeah. So yeah, I went and rescued Nick from his tree stand tonight. I asked Luke if he wanted me to do the same because Luke was trapped in his stand too. Luke said, "Fuck it, I'm getting out." So Luke didn't want rescuing, but
so on that bombshell, if you stuck around with us the whole time, and maybe Nick will listen to this, maybe you won't.
I think Nick does listen because every couple weeks he likes to offer his insight
criticisms.
He's like, Ethan's breathing in the mic.
Ethan, you might still hear
Caleb talks too much.
Ethan's
He doesn't let the guests.
upstairs.
He doesn't let the guests tell their stories, and he's our biggest critic. But it's about time for him to get on the podcast. And I thought he almost might have stayed tonight to jump on it, but at the very
I thought he was gonna.
I thought he was too. He stands up at the last minute.
He did say he didn't
play
want
cards with my daughter tonight.
He didn't want the DEERPRESSION to rub off on.
That's
him.
true
because he has only been hunting.
That's
really,
his third sit.
That was only
third or fourth.
He just kind of started hunting, and now he's got a couple of older
Nick's in the
older
chips.
girls.
I might have to start doing I might just have to start hunting with Nick so I can film some cool shit happen.
Yeah,
see what happens here.
He's
I would love for that. I would love for the wolf to show up on trail camera here, but
You haven't checked.
We have 35. I haven't even checked them.
All right. Well, I think that's about it. This is the first shop talk we've had in a little while.
Yeah, we had one prior to the CJ Alexander. Prior to all that, we had a little shop talk. But podcast coming up. I don't know what we have planned. The next couple weeks are probably going to be a lot of us talking about us hunting. It's just crunch time. That's what you're going to get. We're going to try to get Toby Hughes in the shop. I don't know if we'll be able to get him. We had a scheduled podcast with him the day Isaac shot his, but it was a remote podcast. I kind of want to get Toby in the shop to talk about Buckmaster scoring and then score a bunch of our deer. But yeah, the next couple weeks are going to be us talking about us.
And
I got to get Alex and his daughter Autumn on because Autumn killed her first deer and Alex killed a nice buck this year. And we haven't talked about that at all on the podcast, so I do want to talk about that. West Virginia is coming up. We're going to do a podcast from the Gore Camp for sure, so that'll be one of them. And we have Starlink. We can actually upload a podcast that Monday from the cabin.
We're down there.
Yeah. Based on the events of any hunt, the podcast could change too.
Oh yeah,
of course.
We can have a midweek podcast next week where the wolf's alive and I killed him and life's fucking good, but that ain't gonna happen.
We'll pray for that.
Yeah.
Well, this is Deer Shot Podcast, episode 68. DEERPRESSION. Thanks for sticking with us.
DEERPRESSION.